Happy Thursday, everybody. We are going to continue our talk about payroll taxes today, and specifically the W-4 form. And that came up in the little IRS quiz from yesterday's notes, but it really is the beginning of where the payroll tax situation starts. When you first get hired, and some of you know this because you've had a job the past year or even the year before that, but when you first got hired, you filled out a W-4 form. And that basically tells your employer how much money to take out of your check so that when you pay your taxes at the end of the year, you'll have enough already waiting for you that you it's sort of like a savings account in some respect. That's sort of stored away, and then you can use that money toward your taxes. So the W-4 is sort of like an estimator that figures out how much to take out. So when you start a new job, you're required to fill out a W-4 form. With this form, your employer handles withdrawing and paying your taxes for you based on your allowances. On the form, you enter your name, address, social security number, and you must check whether you are single, married, or this other unique choice of married but withholding at a higher single rate. Not really super important right now, but you should be aware that that's one of the choices. So you'll check one of these boxes on the W-4 as you're filling it out. Now, on line 5 of the W-4 form, which we'll show you in a little bit, and actually, this is what it looked like up until the last calendar year. They changed it and they made the form longer. It's intended on making it easier for people, but it's a little bit overwhelming to learn it on the new form. So we're just going to show you on this one, and then the concept is still the same. So on line 5 of this one, the W-4 tells your employer the withholding rate for your pay. At what rate do you want to take out money from this person's check? And you can claim from none, from 0, up to as many allowances as you want. Now, what that means, allowances, think of it this way. If you are single and 22 years old and have no children, you could claim 0, you could claim 1. There really isn't a rule to what number you claim. But it's basically the number of people that you're taking care of. So if you put 0, that means you're taking care of nobody, not even yourself. Maybe someone's providing for you. And if you're taking care of nobody, you're going to have a certain amount taken out of your paycheck because you're going to owe a certain amount at the end of the year. If you had 4 children and you were single and you were taking care of yourself, you might claim the number 5 right here. And what that would do is it would take out less money from your check, because if you're taking care of 5 people, the government gives you a break and won't charge you that much in taxes at the end of the year because you're providing for so many people. So then they won't take out as much because there's no need to do that. Now, you could put a higher number. If you wanted all the money, or a lot of your money and very little to be taken out, you could put a higher number here no matter who you were, and you could get a lot more money in your paychecks. But you're going to owe so much at the end of the year, and there won't be any money there for you to pay your taxes. So that's why lying on that form doesn't do you any good. So this number usually, right here, represents but is not limited to the number of individuals you're financially responsible for, which is the scenario I just told you. It is meant to help you and your employer set aside an appropriate percentage of your check to be withheld for taxes. The more allowances you claim, the less money is withheld for your income tax. And again, that's because the more people you take care of, the less amount of taxes the government's going to charge you, so the less needs to come out of your check for that. And you're able to change that number at any time. You just have to call the business office wherever you work and whoever handles the finances there and say, could I change my W-4? And you just fill out a new one and sign it. And from that point forward, it takes out a different amount of money. And this is what it looks like, or really looked like up through, I believe it looked like this up through the 2019 year, which was really last year, because now 2020's year just ended. So if you got a job today, it would say 2021, but the form's a little bit longer now. It's more of a worksheet. But basically, name, social security number, which you should know by now. Don't ever write that unless you absolutely have to. Don't give it out over the phone or on the internet unless you have to. Always question who's asking for your social security number. Anyway, and then here's that single, married, and at a higher rate choice that we talked about. And here's where the calculations really happen in here. Total number of allowances you're claiming. And that's where you put one of these numbers here. That's where you could put 0 if you want to make sure to cover all your taxes. But if you did have multiple children you were taking care of, or even if you were single with one kid, or if you start putting a number like 2 here, that means you're taking care of 2 people. So you're going to owe less in taxes. So then your employer will give you more money every week because you're not going to need to save up for the big tax bill. And then on top of that estimate, and there's a formula that figures out the percentage to take out. You could take out at a flat rate on top of that, which is actually what I do. I believe I have a 1 here. I should know this, but I believe I have, so I'm married with 2 kids, but I put 1 just because I thought that would take out enough money to cover my taxes, and it did for years, but then my tax situation changed and I was not getting enough taken out, so I owed too much at the end of the year. So then I just added another $100. I asked the business office here if I could fill out a new W-4. I asked for $100 to be taken out in addition to what was taken out because of that number 1. And then every check, every time we get paid, another $100 comes out. And at the end of the year, which just happened when I file my taxes, hopefully that was 100 times 26 paychecks. So I had $2,600 more taken out this year. Hopefully that's enough to cover it. So you got to keep an eye on this as you get older and your income changes. And then you sign it, date it, and it becomes official. And that's what I just talked about was right here. You can authorize your employer to withhold an additional amount from each paycheck to cover the taxes. The federal taxes you pay, and this is, remember, federal is talking about the United States government, because we have a lot of governments where we live, right? You're part of the United States government, but then you're also part of the state of New York state's government. You're also part of the town you live in, such as the colony, town, or city municipal governments, school district governments, whatever. But when we're talking about here is federal taxes. So the United States of America takes taxes out of our check. So does the state of New York, but we're not talking about that yet. So the federal taxes you pay are used by the government to invest in technology, education, and to provide goods and services for the benefit of American people. Right? So we benefit from the taxes. We all chip in so that we all get a service back, whether that's police officers, highways, bridges, roads, schools, all that kind of stuff. So the 3 biggest categories that our taxes are used for are major health programs, such as Medicare, we talked about yesterday, which is the government health program for anybody who's either not working or disabled, doesn't have health insurance. Social Security, which we talked about yesterday, was another word for FICA, and that's an amount of money given to either retired people over a certain age or disabled people as a small amount of income. So if they can't work due to age or disability, they'll still have money to live on. And then, of course, defense, which is our Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, our how we defend our country, and obviously our national security. So that's where our taxes go. So everything you see our country spend money on, that money is tax money from our citizens that comes out of your paycheck. And here's another pie graph of one example from the internet of where the money goes. You can see where the most We just talked about Social Security, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, healthcare, Medicare. Then there's a bunch of little slices too. We borrow a lot of money as a country from other countries, sometimes more than we should. And that money we talked about early in the year. And when you borrow money, there's interest. So some of that, our taxes goes to pay the interest on those loans. And then there's, little bits that are sliced up in here. Now, this is a little misleading. This little tiny slice for education right here makes it look like we don't really care about education. The federal government doesn't spend a whole lot of money on education. That's the state and local governments. So yes, we do collect money from the government, for the USA, United States government, for education, and then they spread that out a little bit. But for the most part, that money is going to come from a different amount of taxes, property taxes, which is something totally different that we'll talk about later in the year. And like South Colony Central Schools gets most of its money from state and local taxes, not from the United States government. So it's not that there isn't that much money for education. The biggest chunk of that comes from something different. Okay. So here's everybody's pay stub looks different, but generally speaking, they have the same information on it. So somewhere on your paycheck, if you have a job, if you looked closely at it, you would see deductions. And you'll see either Medicare, FICA, Social Security, federal, state. Those are all going to be on everybody's pay stubs. Sometimes when you get older and you have like a health care plan through your employer, that might be listed here as well. And there might be, if you're in a union, maybe the union dues are listed here. Anything that comes out of your check, they have to keep track of here. But even if you're a high school part-time worker, you're all going to have these four come out of your check. So this is for healthcare. This is for income for people who don't work anymore, both of which you can take advantage of later in life. Your federal taxes right here, which is what we've been talking about. And we haven't gotten into the numbers here yet, but the New York State tax would also be added onto that. So you'll notice all of these numbers on your pay stub. And of course, you'll notice that you earned this amount of money, which is called your gross pay. And then they didn't give you this much, right? These are your deductions. So you really subtract that out and you only get to keep the net pay, which is significantly less. And sometimes it's frustrating to see that, but at the same time, it's going to things that we absolutely need. You're going to take advantage of some of these things down the road. And but then there's certainly arguments and debates between politicians and lawmakers and voters about how much should go to each one of those things. And that's a big thing when we talk about elections, and a big sticking point between different government philosophies. Should we take out more money and give people more things to more people, or should we take out less money, but you have to kind of fend for yourself type of thing? So there's different ways of looking at it. But in some countries, like in Europe, I think it's in Scandinavia, like Finland and Norway, in that area, they take out even more. They take about half of your money. So if you make $10 an hour, you really only make $5 an hour. But the government gives people a lot more services than we were given. So they tax higher, but then they give more things back. So there's just different ways. In some other countries, may be the opposite. May tax you very little, but not give you very much in return either. All different government philosophies. So we'll continue learning about taxes, and being the month of February, and some of you were talking about getting your W-2s already, we'll eventually talk about how to file those taxes coming up soon.